paused a little bit because Harley was cleaning some part of his anatomy, and it wasn't sounding particularly pleasant, so I thought I'd wait until he's finished. Are you done cleaning that bit? Yeah? Cool. So, we'll go from the lowland and we'll travel right up to the other side of Scotland to do this little beauty. This was another one from Malt and Mike, a nice little surprise. He said, I'm going to send you a couple of samples and there'll be a surprise in there for you as well. And the surprise was this, Wolfburn, which I'm very excited to try because he said it is very, very good. Unfortunately, they let him down a little bit, and I'll get into that in a second. So, Wolfburn is a brand new distillery that is also a very, very old distillery. The distillery itself is here. It's just northwest of Thurso, only just outside that town, and it has basically usurped Old Pulteney as the most northerly Scotch whisky distillery on the mainland of Scotland. Wick is a little bit further down on the coast. It is 22 miles away from where Wolfburn is. But Wolfburn now has the title of the Most Northerly Distillery. Now, this distillery was actually opened by a guy called William Smith in 1821, and it was run by his family kind of in fits and spurts. It was run continuously until 1837, and at the time, in the region of Caithness, which is essentially it's like a county, which is that very tidbit of Scotland. It was the largest producing in the county, and it was doing just the local area. It was just supplying demand for the local villages and towns in the area. So it was run until 1837 within the family. David Smith, who was I think a grandson, is recorded as then reopening the distillery in 1852, but running it for a grand total of 1 year before it closed down again. In the main, it seems to be that from that point onwards, it didn't operate anymore, although there are some records to suggest that in the 1860s it was sort of running like intermittently every now and again. But essentially we can say from 1852 that was it. Now in 19 what are you on about, Ben? In 2012, a company called Aurora Brewing were granted planning permission to essentially rebuild Wolfburn Distillery, and they broke ground in August of 2012. As close to the site of where the distillery was, and this was like an archaeological dig almost, because some of the original buildings remained, but they were underground. They were basically kind of like grown over and everything like that. So apparently it's 350 metres from where the original distillery stood is where the new distillery stands. Now Wolfburn, the name, actually comes from the water source. It's the local name for where the water came from. And production at the distillery apparently commenced on the 25th of January 2013. So to break ground in August the year before and literally 4 or 5 months later start production is pretty impressive stuff, and some pretty quick building. So this now is essentially their first release. They did what they called an inaugural release, which was a limited edition of 875, not even close to what you're about. It was 200 quid, 875 bottles, but this is their basically their first release, their standard release. This isn't the fancy one. This is what you will find. So it's a no age statement, but it's 3-year-old, and it's this was released officially on the 14th of March, so this hasn't been out that long. Now, Malt and Mike's review of this, which is online, came out last week, and is possibly the first review online of it in terms of video review. So I might be the second. Probably not, but you never know. And you're looking at 45 quid for this particular one. So they don't put an age statement on it, but it's clearly 3 years old. But by doing no age statement, as new bottlings, as older versions come out, they can basically do older versions and not have to like change the labels or anything like that. Now they use unpeated malt, but they mature it in a combination of sherry and bourbon casks, and also casks that are known as quarter casks that are from Islay. Now, Mike was very sneaky and didn't actually say, but he was giving a pretty good indication as where it's from. And I can kind of guess myself because it's from Islay, and there is an Islay distillery on the south coast that do actually have a range called the Quarter Cask, which Asda apparently is selling for 25 quid, which is a ridiculous bargain because it's absolutely bloody brilliant. So I'm going to hazard a guess that the Islay distillery that release a range called the Quarter Cask are probably giving Wolfburn those quarter casks to mature this in. Now, I'm not going to say out loud which one it is because there might be some kind of NDA, or it might get me in trouble or something like that. But my guess, I'll give you a clue of what I think it might be, and I could be completely wrong. This is the thing, but I think it might be a distillery on the south coast of Islay that starts with the letter L and ends in Afroig. But I might be wrong. Probably am. So apparently, and judging by the colour, almost certainly no colouring added. In terms of filtration, not a clue. Not really bothered. They can chill filter it or not chill filter it. I'm not, whatever. But I would guess that there is no colouring, because that is a proper like white wine, real pale white wine as well. That's like Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc, something like that. Very, very pale indeed. Now this is released at 46%, and straight away on the nose, Islay. Really, really, it's a good combination of bonfire smoke and TCP. The two kind of separate elements of classic Islay peated whiskey. It can go down one route. It can go down like the bonfire smoky route, or it can go down that medicinal iodine route, and a combination of the two is really, really good indeed, and it's there on the nose. And a nice intensity as well. It's not too full on, but it's definitely there. If this is picked up just from the casks, that is some pretty impressive stuff. Now bear in mind, quarter casks are the size of the cask, that's why it's called that. It's a quarter the size of what would be a standard cask. So you've got more whiskey in contact with wood, relatively speaking, in terms of it's a smaller cask, so there is more interacting with the wood. And if it has had Islay whiskey in and they've just given it to Wolfburn, and Wolfburn have put their new spirit into it, it's going to suck out a lot of those flavours and influences from that cask and mix it into that spirit. So if that's just from the cask, that is mightily impressive stuff. That smells wonderful. That smells really, really good. And not harsh, not tight, not young. 3 years old, this. And there is a really, really good complexity, but there's a delicacy to it and a softness as well, and a nice sweetness. Quite looking forward to this. Very, very good indeed. Would never have said that's 3-year-old at all, or 5 or 8 at a push. Would say that's what's the youngest that is? The very youngest, 8-year-old, but I'd say 10 or more easy on that. That's incredible for a 3-year-old whiskey. That is absolutely rocking. They've got the ABV bang on, because I think at 40 it would probably be a little bit too weak and a little bit too watered down, but you wouldn't really want it any stronger, because the 46% is just lifting it and just giving you enough heat just to make things interesting, but not overpower the flavours that are there, because the flavours that are there are sweet. There is like a sweetness, there's candy floss, there is bonfire smoke, there is very gentle iodine, there's a little bit of menthol in there, but it's very delicate. It's not in your face, and everything bubbles along really nicely, and that alcohol percentage just lifts it enough and gives you enough of a heat, but it doesn't overpower those delicate flavours that are in there. That's stupidly easy drinking. That is up there with Black Bottle for an easy drinking Islay. As an introduction into Islay whiskey, I know it's not an Islay whiskey, I know it's mainland Scotland, but if you wanted to, if somebody was saying, I've heard about peated whiskies, I'm not sure whether I'd like them or not, could you give me one that, could you let me try one that would be like it's got some of the flavours in, but it's not too overpowering. Black Bottle or that. That's brilliant. That's stupidly good for something brand new that's 3 years old. Now, unfortunately, Wolfburn kind of let Mortimer Mike down a little bit, and I'd like to say that he was a friend of mine, even though we've never met and I've only known him for a few months, but I've kind of got to know him through Facebook and messaging and things like that, and he was quite annoyed at them, and it was a shame. It was just a lack of communication. They said they were going to send him a bottle, he'd offered to pay for one, things like that, and it was like, can I get a bottle to do a review? And they just blanked him and then started giving him excuses. So it sounds like there's been a bit of a breakdown in the communication and that can be worked on. You can sort that out. You can have a word. You can do some training, do whatever, because they do not want to cock that up. They don't want to make a mess of everything else around that, because what is in their bottle is phenomenal stuff. That is bloody brilliant. And they don't want to be turning customers away. They don't want to be starting to get bad reputations for bad press and things like that. Not saying that they are. I'm hoping it was just a one-off, and it was just a bit of miscommunication, and emails were written the wrong way in terms of somebody probably didn't proofread what they'd written before they sent it to Mike, that sort of thing. Because what is in here is very, very good indeed. And the thing is, on Mike's review, although he has a bit of a go at them, his review of the whiskey is fantastic. You can't fault it, and you can't. It's brilliant. As a person that likes Islay whiskey, that is unbelievably good for a 3-year-old. That's stupidly good. I don't know how they've done that. I'd be really intrigued to see how this progresses in age. My fear is that is their pinnacle, and as it ages, it actually loses that delicate balance, because this is a delicate Islay whiskey. It doesn't have enough oomph to be able to stay. To me, it feels like it doesn't have enough oomph and backbone. What the hell's backbone? Backbone to then stay in cask for another 5, 8, 10, 15 years without losing that delicacy that it's got. And it just becomes a bit thin and a bit unbalanced and a bit washed out. But I'd be really intrigued to find out what happens to it. And hell, if they have a 3-year-old whiskey that is that good, they don't need to age it any longer in cask, because that is phenomenal. That is really, really good. I can't recommend that even more. Having just done my Q1 quarterly review, where I've gone the most surprising and the favourite Scotch is 93, second one into the second quarter, that's going in there. Favourite Scotch and most surprising, that's on the list, almost definitely. That's amazing stuff. Mike, thank you so much for that. That was absolutely brilliant. It's a shame they kind of dropped the ball a bit with Mike and the interaction with him and all that lot. He goes into it into his video. Go and see his video as well. I think me and him are pretty much on the same page in terms of what we think of the actual whiskey itself. Great stuff. Really, really good. I very much look forward to their next few releases, because they are definitely onto a winner. Right, that's that one done. I shall see you at the next one. Cheers.